Good evening. It's a pleasure to share this pulpit with so many wonderful men of God. Thank you, Pastor, for giving me this opportunity. You know, I've been mentioned at the center of some controversy lately. According to the Modesto Bee, it reminds me of a story of a little boy who went with his parents from the big city of Chicago to a dude ranch in Wyoming for a vacation. And he barely knew how to read, just a young boy, just starting school. And he would stand in front of that big picture window, having never seen a cowboy before. And when a cowboy would ride by, much to his mother's chagrin, he would yell out, "Mama, Mama, look at those bow-legged cowboys." Oh, she would put her hand over his mouth and say, "Hush, Junior, you can't say something so impolite." Sure enough, a few minutes later, another cowboy, much to her chagrin again, he would say, "Mama, Mama, look at those bow-legged cowboys." And on and on and on this went all afternoon. Finally, she had it. She pulled out of the suitcase a big book of Shakespeare, tucked it underneath his arm, and said, "Junior, you march up to that room right now. And until you learn how to speak the King's English properly, don't you dare come back down into this area." 4 or 5 hours went by. She was beginning to wonder what was going on. And then she saw him come down that staircase. Kind of looked astute and scholarly, had that book tucked under his arm, and he pointed out the picture window at the first cowboy and said, "Mother, Mother, what manner of men are these that wear their legs in parentheses?" Such is the influence of good literature. You know, a heart of thanksgiving has been refined by life's trials. That heart of thanksgiving is truly one rooted in thanksgiving, and then anticipates the blessings yet to come. I don't know about you, but I find it extremely easy to dwell on my petty problems. And what might seem like a molehill to you will be a mountain to me. You know, it's all about perspective. And mine can be very self-centered at times. It's a common prayer of mine to ask the Lord to help me to grow up when I find myself grumbling and complaining about the smallest of inconveniences. Have you ever asked God to help you see the big picture? Think for a moment that might be a good thing, but just maybe we couldn't quite handle it at the moment. And just maybe, just there's a chance that there's a reason for being in the trenches. So we can learn with the people who are there with us, who experience life one day at a time. You know, I once heard someone say, the big problem with life is that it's so daily. Isn't it though? I'd like to focus on 3 aspects of giving thanks tonight. And the first I'd like to illustrate is giving thanks often has very little to do with our immediate circumstances. To help me illustrate this, let's take a look at someone in the Old Testament, Joseph. In the book of Genesis 50:20, we read a proclamation from this son of Jacob. His brothers would say his favorite son, thus the reason for their jealousy. As he addressed his evil brothers in 50:20, he says, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about it as it is this day to save many people alive." After the death of his father Jacob, Joseph addresses his jealous brothers who now feared that this powerful man, this governor of Egypt, might repay them for the evil that they deserved after they had sold him to slave traders on their way to Egypt. It was either that or kill him. They really didn't want his actual blood on their hands, so this was the lesser of 2 evils in their opinion. But as Paul Harvey would say, here is the rest of the story. Purchased by Pharaoh, Joseph rose to a level of prominence and wealth, as I said, the governor of Egypt, and was able to later bless his brothers and provide food for them during a great famine, probably at a time that they would have perished without his help. He literally saved their lives when they only wanted to end his life. So here we find them trembling in fear, and Joseph assures them that he would bring them no harm. Did they deserve justice? Absolutely. Instead, they were granted mercy. Let's fast forward the time clock to the year 1612. We see a young Native American named Tisquantum. You and I know him today as Squanto, who was captured by slave traders on the coast of New England and shipped to Europe, where he would be blessed by some monks who took him in and taught him the ways of the Lord. While in London a few years later, Squanto learned English well enough to help him later become a translator for a tribe in his homeland, America, as they communicated with the new settlers from England. When Squanto returned to America, though, his heart was broken when he found out that his entire village was wiped out, including his family, due to disease. And after a time of mourning and living alone in the forest, he was invited by a nearby Indian village to live among them, and later would become their mediator and their communicator with these new settlers. And not only help them, but in turn be a blessing to the settlers and help them survive. Nearly half of them were killed that first winter. Had it not been for people like Squanto, they probably all would have perished. You see, what God meant for evil, what man had meant for evil, God had meant for good. Chuck Colson said that the most amazing part of this story is that most people have never heard it before. There is certainly a significant movement in our country today to revise history and make it say certain things that just flat are not true. And if it weren't for God using willing men and women to work out his will, this country would not have lasted as long as it has. These two parallel stories tell of God turning near possible odds into a winning combination. When darkness seemed to encompass the circumstances, God shined a ray of hope that turned into amazing opportunities to bless others through these two willing servants. Thanksgiving is most appreciated when our expression of gratitude is rooted in difficult times. It wasn't about Joseph or Squanto, you see. It always was about God and how he chose to work through their lives, and also people like you and me today. Without an attitude of thanksgiving, our hearts are not prepared to let God use us. If we only see the difficulty of our circumstances, we're going to be unable to see the hand of God working in the situation. Secondly, I'd like to illustrate that giving thanks is done best when it is done often. Do you ever find yourself thanking for God for what otherwise might be taken for granted? You know, we really shouldn't have to get sick to appreciate health. We shouldn't have to be hungry to appreciate good food. And we shouldn't have to fight to enjoy peace. But as we obey the Lord's command in Matthew 25, our focus is on others. And we worry less about our own minuscule problems, which, by the way, all too often become the object of our ability to be thankful. When I visit those in prison, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give a cup of water to those who are thirsty, I'm not focusing on my issues as much, and they become a little bit smaller, and my bounty becomes a little bit more bountiful. It is the attitude and the act of giving thanks that provides the fuel to keep the heart of the believer fresh and in touch with the will of God. And as I give thanks, I discover more blessings for which to give thanks. It's the way it works. And Philippians 4:8 says that we should focus on that is what is true, noble, just, pure, lovely, and of good report. Surely a heart of thanksgiving will emerge from that kind of focus in our lives. Thirdly and finally, I'd like to focus on giving thanks makes more sense in context of the bigger picture. Henry Blackaby would take it one step further and say, really our duty is to find out where God is working and join him there. It's not, Lord, please work in my life. Rather, it should be, Lord, help me participate in your will for my life and not be a spectator, but a willing participant who trusts you for everything. Without a heart of thanksgiving, our spiritual eyes are blinded to the possibilities of what God can do for us and through us. He is working, but our ability to see his handiwork is severely limited when we fail to give thanks. In summary, it's more about attitude than it is altitude. It's not about lifting me up. It's about lifting God up with an attitude of praise and thanksgiving. My cousin Becky, she's an amazing woman of God, and her husband Jim is equally amazing. Jim serves as the pastor of the Hood River Church of the Nazarene in Hood River, Oregon. He's had cancer for the past 6 years. And he absolutely typifies who I want to be when I grow up. He's been through chemotherapy so many times.